Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion. A poetry discussion today that comes to us from Sylvia Plath. The poem in question is called Daddy. You do not do any more, black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or achoo. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time, marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours bean green over blue in the waters of beautiful Nauset. I used to pray to recover you. Ach, du. In the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars, wars, wars. But the name of the town is common. My Polak friend says there are a dozen or two. So I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you, the tongue stuck in my jaw. It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ich, 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 ich. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. An engine, chuffing me off like a Jew to Dachau or Auschwitz or Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. The snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna, are not very pure or true. With my gypsy ancestress and my weird luck and my Tarock pack, I may be a bit of a Jew. I have always been scared of you, with your Luftwaffe and your gobbledygook, and your neat mustache, and your Aryan eye, bright blue, Panzerman, oh, you. Not God, but a swastika. So black no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist. The boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you. A cleft chin instead of your foot, but no less a devil for that. No, not any less the black man who bit my pretty red heart in two. I was 10 when they buried you. At 20 I tried to die and get back to you. I thought even the bones would do. But they pulled me out of the sack, and they stuck me together with glue. And then I knew what to do. I made a model of you, a man in black with a Mein Kampf look, and a love of the rack and the screw. And I said, I do. So, Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. The voices just can't worm through. If I've killed one man, I've killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year, 7 years, if you want to know. Daddy, you can lie back now. There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, you bastard. I'm through. If you want an interpretation of not so veiled racism, if you want an interpretation of gender, you can get that anywhere on the internet that you want. That's not what I'm going to talk about today. So what I want to talk about is a little bit different. Plath is often referred to as a confessional poet. There is something near and dear to my heart, not confessional poetry, but something known as dangerous writing. This is a school of writing which is championed, possibly created, I don't know the exact origins of this school, by Tom Spanbauer. And he says that what dangerous writing is is a lot like confession. But what the writer does is puts the thoughts on paper that he or she is most afraid of. Afraid that by putting them on paper, someone will read it and say, I'm judging that guy. I'm going to judge the hell right out of this person. But what is often the case, well, prior to the last few years in culture, what is often the case, is that by putting these most embarrassing thoughts, these scariest things on paper, writing these things down, putting them out there, the reader does not think, the author here is pretty screwed up. Oftentimes what happens is that the reader thinks to themselves, hey, so glad somebody said that. I was thinking it. So glad somebody else feels that way. It's a lot like confession, but I think that what it does is that it takes it one step further. And I think that is more true to the vein that we get maybe oftentimes in Sylvia Plath, but I think definitely in this poem. Here we have a speaker who's telling us these negative things about her father and her vampire, the man that she had married. But the real reason I want to talk about this poem is by following that dangerous writing thread down to the very core, the core which is, I think, so expertly opined upon in this poem. I want to look at two separate stanzas. I want to look at the second stanza and the 16th stanza. The second stanza, which reads, Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time, marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal. And the 16th, there's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, Daddy, you bastard, I'm through. The idea of killing the father, the idea of killing the mother, the idea of killing the authority figure. This is the dangerous idea at the very bottom of nihilism. Nihilism, which is so often given such a terrible name, written off. But I think there's use in nihilism, and I think there's especially use in nihilism for a writer. I don't think many of us would say that Sylvia Plath is difficult to read. I don't think any of us would necessarily contend that Sylvia Plath is not worth reading. And I think that they are these tendencies, these possibly nihilistic, these possibly dangerous writing types of tendencies that make Sylvia Plath so useful to the reader. If we take a step back from the gender interpretation that is normally put on this poem, that is normally sequestered for papers, writing a paper for school. Talk about the authority, the expectations that authority puts upon us. So there's a quote from Nietzsche. It was originally, I think, in The Gay Science, but is most commonly known for being in Thus Spake Zarathustra, the God is dead quote. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderer of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all the world has yet owned, has bled to death under our knives? Who will wipe this blood off of us? What water is there for us to clear ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? That is from Nietzsche. This idea of killing the authority. Killing the authority must be done in order to become the authority. In that second stanza, marble heavy, a bag full of God. Marble heavy, a bag full of God. This is not marble heavy, a bag full of daddy. Not marble heavy, a bag full of pops. Not marble heavy, a bag full of my father. It's a bag full of God. God, the authority. Daddy, the authority. It is necessary in every generation to kill off the previous generation in order that the current generation might inherit the world. This is something ontogeny recapitulating phylogeny. We have to kill our own parents in our lives. We have to kill our own parents as authority figures in order to become the adults we need to be, to run our own lives. A literal interpretation of this poem might not need to go to this level. There is no shortage of biographical interpretations of this poem that lead directly to the fact that maybe Sylvia Plath had abandonment issues or XYZ, whatever it is. Even if that's all true. And, maybe it is. The idea of killing the father has to go deeper than simply his corporeal form. In fact, it could very easily be argued that without that father figure present, it becomes more necessary to kill the father, because the mythos of the father would live in one's head as the mythos that grew out like a tree from the childhood experience. When Sylvia Plath was that, I thought it was 8, but in the poem she says 10, that 10-year-old child. That father figure was monumental, was huge, knew everything, right? Knew all there was to know because knew so much more than a 10-year-old child. Someone who lost this parent will never have that moment where they're with their parent and they step back and say, "What in the high hell are you doing?" Everyone has that moment with a parent who lives long enough to have it, where you see your parent doing something monumentally stupid and it clicks in your head. This person's not a god. This person is a flawed person just like me. Maybe I know better than this person. And in fact, if your parent was a good enough parent, you will, right? It should be the goal of every parent to pass on more to their child than they have. Knowledge-wise, station in life-wise, not just stuff, but all of these things. If that is true, then it is more imperative to kill the parent who is already dead. Because you will never have that moment in itself. You will never have that moment on its own. I think it's also, by the way, speaking about writing, I think it's also a great idea as a writer. I think that a writer has to kill those things. And not, so there's a quote often attributed to Stephen King, but it's a quote actually that's much older, I think, than Stephen King, that a writer has to kill your darlings, right? This is different than that. Killing your darlings means killing the little parts of your writing that are cutesy to you and that you like and you enjoy, but don't really communicate anything deeper. To kill the father, to kill the mother, to kill those things which are precious to you in your writing is very freeing, because after that moment, there can be nothing saccharine in your writing. If you take a moment, whoever it is that's precious to you, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a lover, maybe it's a parent figure, you take a moment, you take a story, you take a short story, you take a poem, you take a novel, whatever it is, and you completely demolish and prove pathetic that thing which you hold so precious. Tear it apart. Even if that's not the type of writing that you normally do, do it. Because afterwards, you are completely freed as a writer. At that point, when you have destroyed all those things holy to you in your own writing, you become the authority on your storytelling. Another thing that I want to talk about with this poem is that the speaker kills the father, but still uses daddy. Daddy being a term of endearment. Now, this can very easily be written off as ironic, an ironic use of the term daddy. Here I am killing you, but I'm still calling you daddy. There is an emotional charge behind something, behind an ironic use such as that. There is an emotional charge which is to empower the speaker. Where is it here? Give me 1 second. Where is it? Daddy, I have to kill you. Daddy, right? That ironic use of the term daddy. I prefer to think of it as an unironic. One of the readings I like to give this poem, my preferred reading of this poem, does not use daddy as ironic. Daddy, I have to kill you. If I still call you daddy and I have to kill you, daddy, I have to kill you. To me, that's a lot more powerful a statement. To me, that is acknowledging that I have to do this. I don't want to. I still hold you as daddy, but I have to do this. Because without doing this, I can't move on. I have to do this thing which is so painful, because without it, I cannot become the person I need to be. I cannot move past. I am stuck right here, so I have to do this. If the daddy term is in fact unironic, and the speaker is still holding the father figure as that monumental figure, there's a lot more pain in this poem. And it reminds me a little bit of a Tech Nine song. The great philosopher Tech Nine, the great poet Tech Nine. I love you, but fuck you. That's the reading that I prefer to give this poem, encapsulated very nicely in that phrase, I love you, but fuck you. With the ironic reading and emotional charge of the use of daddy, our speaker is still stuck in the emotional entanglements of that dynamic, trying instead to usurp the power through this ironic use of the word, rather than the unironic use of daddy, which is to say, I still hold you on this pedestal, but I have to claim my own authority. I do not have to usurp yours. I have to claim my own. It's very possible that there's some diary entry in which Sylvia Plath goes into one interpretation of this or another. I don't care. I don't care what Ted Hughes has to say about it. I think that both of these readings are valid in their usefulness. It just so happens that I prefer the reading where Daddy is unironic. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. It really helps me out here on the channel. If you do decide to hit that like button, if you were here by chance but not designed, consider hitting the subscribe button in order that YouTube might continue to suggest these videos to you in the future. And I've got all sorts of playlists here on the channel, poetry discussions like this one, poetry reviews, short story discussions, short story reviews, novel read-alongs, novel reviews, all of these sorts of things. And I hope to have you back for the next video.